On the face of it, running is supposed to be one of the most natural things for you to do with your body and simple ways for us to exercise. But far too many of us feel like there's something not quite right with how we run and that we need to learn to run properly with good running form. Let's break it down and start with head position. As you run, aim to keep your head up rather than looking down at the ground immediately in front of you. Of course, you need to be able to keep an eye out for trip hazards like rocks, tree roots, and loose paving stones, but try to practice looking down with just your eyes rather than dropping your whole head forwards. If you know you're a runner who has a tendency to chin poke or a tendency to look down as you're running, looking at the ground directly ahead of you, then what's happening is the weight of your head is being held forwards in front of the rest of your body. And the only way it's able to be supported is by the muscles at the back of your neck, those neck extensors, pulling back against the weight of your head being pulled forwards by gravity. Over time they get tired, over time they get tight. Now, one very simple cue you can use to fix that is as you're running along, think about drawing your chin in. Not to the point where you're trying to lean backwards, okay, it's not that, but just simply think about in terms of keeping the shoulders still, but head on neck, try and draw back and give yourself a bit of a double chin like this. Now, it doesn't need to be uncomfortable, it doesn't need to be forced, but I want you to think about that movement and just work into that direction to the point where you feel that your head is centered on top of your shoulders. That simple cue will help to stop you from running with tight, elevated shoulders, shoulders up around your ears, which often then translates into discomfort in your traps, your trapezius muscles. That brings me on to what your arms should be doing as you run. With your head in the right position, it gets much easier for you to run with relaxed shoulders, leaving your arms free to swing back and forth beside your torso as you run. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the main role of your arms while you run is to dampen the rotation of your torso. This keeps rotational forces balanced, which allows you to keep moving forwards more efficiently. Keep your elbows held at around about 90 degrees, or slightly less, to maintain an efficient arm swing, and focus on the backwards drive of each swing. When you're running slowly, your arm swing will be more subtle, but just as with the strides that your legs take, the arm swing will become more dramatic and quicker as you run at faster paces. In terms of what you should be doing with your hands, aim to run with gently closed hands rather than tightly clenching your fists. You can try it for yourself right now. If you clench your fists, the tightness and stiffness then runs right up your arm towards your shoulders. Now that's great if you're throwing a punch, but not great for running. You might find that your hands drift towards or across the midline of your body while you run. While we don't want them to be aggressively driving from side to side, a gentle drift towards the midline is more about your body doing what it needs to do to maintain stability. Don't try to change this too dramatically and force your hands to travel back and forth rigidly. We're all different after all, and some great runners have had some pretty funky arm mechanics. When it comes to your torso, you should be looking to achieve a gentle forward lean. But one mistake a lot of runners make with their running technique is that they think they're leaning forwards, when in fact they're bending forwards at the waist, pushing their butt out backwards, and their chest forwards. Focus on holding your hips and pelvis up and forwards as you run, rather than sitting back, and you'll find that the whole body forward lean is much easier to achieve. It'll be easier for you to find this up and forwards pelvic position if you're also working regularly to improve your hip mobility and core control. Tight hip flexors and weak core muscles will make it harder for you to avoid an anterior pelvic tilt as you run. A forward tilted pelvis makes it harder for you to use your glutes while you're running and most likely leads to you pitching forwards at the waist, as we talked about earlier, rather than maintaining that proper forwards lean. So keep on top of those mobility and core exercises. In fact, I'll leave a link in the description to a free collection of strength and mobility workouts that will help you become a better runner. Okay, so what about your legs? On one hand, I don't need to tell you how to put one foot in front of the other and run. But then again, so many runners make one of the biggest mistakes with their running form, which can lead to inefficiency and injury, and that's that they overstride. That simply means that with every running stride, they overextend with their lower leg and strike the ground too far ahead of the rest of their body, creating more of a braking effect and impact with each stride than your body should have to deal with. Not great for your knees, hips, or back. You should be looking to land your foot beneath a flexing knee as you run, rather than too far ahead of the rest of your body. So, how can you prevent yourself from overstriding? Well, there are two things that you should be working on. You can increase your running cadence, the number of strides you take per minute, which will force you to make shorter, quicker strides. The key here is to work on increasing your cadence without increasing your pace. Otherwise, you'll just be running faster rather than shortening your strides. So pick a pace, let's say 9-minute miles, and try and work on just increasing your cadence at that pace by up to 10%. It doesn't have to be a huge change to have a big effect. Then you also need to think about the mechanics of your leg swing. Are you picking your feet up enough as you run? Some of you will have seen this clip before, but here's a reminder of why that matters.
So what I often hear from people who are trying to improve their running technique is that they're moving from a place where they know they overstride, so they land their foot too far ahead of their center of mass, too far ahead of their body as they're moving forwards, slamming the brakes on with each stride, usually with a heel strike, and trying to move to a position where they're landing closer to underneath a flexing knee, closer to underneath their center of mass. That could still be with a heel strike, or it could be midfoot, forefoot. Don't worry too much about foot strike position. We're talking about stride length with this. We want to move away from a place where we're overstriding. Shortening up the stride, increasing the cadence is usually the thought process, but the question has to come, what happens when we want to run faster? When is it and how is it okay to increase your stride length, which is all an important part of running faster. We need to cover more ground per stride. So there's two ways that we can cover the ground. Either, which is the situation where people start to overstride, you just start to throw the lower leg out in front of you because you're carrying the knee too low for the given pace. You're not creating enough hip flexion and knee drive. So by throwing that lower leg out in front of you, you set yourself up to overstride. Or you can pick the foot up a little bit more underneath you, drive the knee forwards a little bit more, create this improved kind of triple flex position, so hip flexion, knee flexion, ankle dorsiflexion, and cover the ground while you're in flight and allow that foot to drop underneath a flexing knee. So by picking the foot up a little bit more, driving the knee forwards a little bit more, you'll increase what we refer to as your stride angle. So if I use the squat rack here, we're thinking about the angle between the hip driving forwards with this femur driving forwards on the swing leg and the extending hip out behind you. You're increasing that angle, and from there you can just drop that foot underneath the flexing knee. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that makes sense. Essentially, the faster you run, the more ground you need to cover, the higher you need to pick your foot up, the further forwards you need to drive that knee. Naturally, if you get that right, the foot will land under you rather than ahead of you.
Now, when it comes to foot strike, you might hear some coaches or articles telling you that you shouldn't be landing on your heels, that heel striking isn't proper running form, and that all runners should be forefoot running. The truth is that there's nothing wrong with heel striking in itself. Problems usually tend to occur when heel striking is combined with overstriding. If you're habitually a heel striking runner, the goal should be for you to achieve a light and subtle heel strike as your foot lands beneath your knee, or even a gentle midfoot strike. That's going to be far more sustainable than trying to completely change your running technique and become a forefoot runner. Proper running technique is about so much more than how your foot strikes the ground anyway. Check out the video on screen right now to see what we can learn from breaking down the running techniques of some of the best elite runners of all time. And I'll see you in the next one.